Everybody, this is the Wednesday, December 5th, 2018 afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Please call the roll, Sue.
Udaly. Here. Fritz. Here. Fish. Here. Salzman.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the Council Clerk's Office for Communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist or if you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good. Thank you. If you could please read the first item, Sue.
Item 1251, authorize a memorandum of agreement between the city and the Portland Police Association to amend the current collective bargaining agreement in effect between the city and the Portland Police Association to include the classification of public safety support specialist classification as part of the Portland Police Association collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. The item before us functionally resides in the world of labor relations and would normally be presented by labor relations, who is in the room today. But I'd like to take the unusual step, given the significance of this milestone, to present the item myself. In early November, after months of negotiation, the Portland Police Association formally approved the terms and conditions by which the public safety support specialists, otherwise known as PS3s, would be included in the PPA. That includes specifics about the program, such as scope of work, training, and wages. Now, Commissioners, it's our turn. With the approval of this agreement, we're clearing a way for the program to begin in earnest, starting with the posting of the PS3 position and recruitment. But first, I want to make sure that the community understands what the position is and what it is not. Fundamentally, PS3s will assist the Portland Police Bureau in responding to non-emergency calls that do not require police authority, which means that they'll spend a large portion of their time in the street in their own specially marked vehicles. They will not be behind the wheel of a PPB patrol vehicle. In June, when this position was approved, I listed some of the duties our PS3s will undertake. Those duties have not changed. PS3s will write police reports for non-emergency situations that do not require police authority, such as vehicle break-ins with no suspect information, bike thefts, burglaries with no suspect information, and the like. They will respond in the community to non-injury traffic collisions, also making themselves available to pedestrians, bicyclists, and other community members who are in need of assistance. They will be in the community conducting follow-up on property crimes where there is no specific suspect information, placing an emphasis, of course, on victims' rights. They'll assist officers in searching for missing persons, such as elderly adults, vulnerable adults, and children. They will go on walking patrols. They'll attend your neighborhood meetings and other community events, and they'll generally serve as ambassadors of goodwill for the Bureau in the community. This list is not exhaustive, but it's just a snapshot of the kinds of things the PS3s will be detailed to do. There's quite a bit of work currently performed by sworn members that does not require police authority. The work I've just mentioned are a few examples. For example, it takes about 18 months for a sworn officer to go through their certification and their training process. Not every single call requires a sworn officer with certification and training and a firearm to be deployed. There are many situations, including the ones I just described, where PS3s could be deployed instead. To hire PS3s means that we increase the bandwidth of officers who are sworn, who are trained, who are certified to engage with the community. We give our officers through this program the time to do more than run from call to call to call. It's a better allocation of our scarce resources. Public safety support specialists will be non-sworn Bureau personnel. They will not be police officers. They will not carry firearms. They will not have the authority to make arrests. They will not be able to detain community members. We've confirmed with the state that they do not need to be certified by a DPSST because they don't meet the Oregon definition of a police officer. Police officers have the authority and the responsibility for enforcing laws, enforcing criminal laws. PS3s unequivocally will not have this same authority. This program has been set up to maximize seamless integration into both the Portland Police Bureau and the community. Rather than having a siloed unit, the 12 PS3s will be decentralized and distributed amongst the 3 precincts. Like officers, they'll report directly to sergeants, but their work will be substantially different. This is not a community engagement or community policing unit per se. As Chief Outlaws expressed repeatedly, the work is not something that should be performed by a single detached unit, but rather community policing is a philosophy that has to be embodied throughout the organization, from training to policy to hiring. As such, PS3s will be deployed throughout the Bureau and not serve as a standalone, isolated unit. PS3s will unequivocally not be manning front desk for our precincts, as some have suggested. There are already people in place who do that work and a union that protects their ability to conduct that work. To be clear, we agreed with PPA leadership on this point. Council has agreed as well. Prior to the unanimous vote to approve the creation of the position, Council offices engaged in a conversation about the scope of the work for PS3s. My office met with commissioner offices in order to provide the class specification and answer any lingering questions. There was a lot of energy and excitement around the program, and that remains true to this day. Nothing about the program has changed since June. Many of my remarks today repeat what has already been said in these chambers, outside of City Hall, and in private conversations. What I'm asking the council to do today is to approve one more needed step in this process. Council's action would formally include PS3s in the PPA, something that was promised by my predecessor and 2 of my colleagues when the PPA contract was renegotiated and passed in 2016. With this step, the city will be able to fulfill a long-held promise to the community and begin the process of recruiting PS3s. I'll echo Commissioner Fritz's previously expressed sentiments to say that we need PS3s out on the streets as soon as possible in order to assist Portlanders. I hope to expand the number of PS3s within PPB well beyond the initial 12 personnel. As Commissioner Udaley and I have both noted, officer presence is not needed for every call. We're overloading our officers with work that could be delegated to non-sworn staff. We don't have to. It's a waste of limited resources. The expansion of this program, as its efficacy is assessed through data, will help lead the Bureau to a stronger community policing model. I'd like to give my colleagues the opportunity to ask questions about the program. For that, I've asked to be present Nicole Grant, my senior policy advisor who has worked on this program for many, many months, Captain Erica Hurley of the Portland Police Bureau Training Division, Mark Amberg, who is the Deputy City Attorney, and Jarrell Gaddis, who's the Labor Relations Manager, and I see Deputy Chief Robert Day is also with us. I don't know if you want to participate, but you're certainly invited to do so.
Just here for decoration, sir.
Good, we'll have you up at the mic then. Welcome, thank you for coming on up, and if my colleagues have further questions, this would be a good time to answer it. Nicole, if you have anything to add that I neglected to add, please feel free to do so. And as you speak, if you speak, could you please state your name for the record?
So, Commissioners, I'm Nicole Grant, Senior Policy Advisor to the Mayor. For the record, I just want to kind of invite my colleagues up to answer any questions that you may have about the tentative agreement or the program specifically.
Well, I guess
Commissioner Saltzman.
I'm curious to know what kind of training will they have?
So this is Captain Erica Hurley with the Training Division. There's a six-week program that we're going to put them through, and so it's modified, obviously, some of the skills that an officer would need, they will not go through. But we do have most of the classroom, or much of the classroom that an officer will go through, they will go through. So they will take implicit bias classes and procedural justice classes and those kinds of things as they go forward. We'll have a class that talks about what calls that they will take and how to handle those calls, report writing classes, of course, because they'll need to know how to write the reports for the things we're asking them to do. They'll have a driving course because they have vehicles that they do need to drive throughout the city, as well as some just basic safety issues for themselves, as well as for traffic. We're asking them to do things like traffic control and those kinds of things. Those are learned skills, and so they'll have a class on that. They will also be CIT certified.
And we're doing, the Portland Police Bureau is doing the training?
That's correct. It's a 6 weeks course at the Training Division of the Portland Police Bureau.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Commissioner Fish.
Can someone explain to me why, after the bargaining that occurred, there seems to be this conflicting vision between the police union president and the mayor's office about what the actual role of these PS3s will be going forward? How do we reconcile that, since presumably we've been bargaining over the very issue that now seems to be in dispute?
I'll answer that, Commissioner Fish, excuse me, I apologize. I actually don't understand Darrell Turner's position on specifically whether PS3s will be manning the front desk precincts. That issue was settled late last year by BHR. We made sure to kind of carve out duties that would absolutely not have any overlap with positions that are protected or within AFSCME. And so that quote caught us by surprise and is factually untrue.
Well, but it's what we're talking about prior to the action that you're asking us to vote on today. What it illustrates to me is a bit of a disconnect between the vision of our labor partner and the vision of the city in terms of what these positions will be, what our expectations are going forward. So, are we setting ourselves up for endless disputes and grievances with PPA over exactly what is the job description, or do you feel confident that we've ironed out in the negotiations what the scope of authority is, consistent with the mayor's opening statement?
I feel that we have our discussions with the PPA, and Jarrell and Mark, please feel free to chime in. We're fairly kind of clear. And we have very clear documentation as well that lays out the job duties. You all were provided with copies of the class specification in June. That is what we agreed to. And so nowhere in those documents does it say that they will be engaging in front desk or administrative or clerk work, excuse me. So I'm not concerned about there being future conflict with the PPA. Again, don't understand where that language came from. And when our discussions with the PPA concluded, we were all absolutely on the same page.
Terrell, do you want to add anything to that?
That's accurate. We were at the table for a long time, and at no time did administrative duties come into the conversation.
And to be clear, if that had been part of the conversation, we would be at risk of violating the recognition clause that we currently have with AFSCME for the positions that they represent within the police union. Is that within the police bureau? Is that correct?
That is correct. Furthermore, we met with AFSCME and PCL and went over this exact spec to make sure it wasn't violating any of their current job descriptions, that it wasn't mirrored. So we involved the unions as well. That was brought to our attention by Commissioner Fritz had asked for us to engage with Portland City Laborers and AFSCME when we were creating the job spec. So we made sure that it was explicitly not having anything to do with the body of work that AFSCME and Portland City Laborers currently do.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mayor, for continually briefing me about this over many, many months. So one of my questions, Nicole, you work for Mayor Hales and were part of getting the contract. There's been some comments in the press about this being rushed through before Commissioner Hardesty gets here, which I find extraordinary considering it's 2 years since the contract went through. Why has it taken so long?
Negotiations with the PPA are long and belabored. We've been in conversations with them since late last year, but the conversation around CSOs, now PS3, began in 2016. Likely, actually, even before then, the contract itself was ratified in October 2016. And so with that, the language in the tentative agreement specifically addresses CSOs, now PS3s, being included in the PPA bargaining unit, and the city and PPA engaging in discussions over the feasibility of a program. Those discussions began in earnest with the advent of Mayor Wheeler's administration, and I don't quite recall when in 2017 they began, but it was later in the year, and we've had ongoing conversations about the scope of work, training, et cetera, the uniform, whether they would carry firearms. That conversation had to be internal initially, so among city stakeholders, and then we had several meetings with the PPA over time to get to the June council hearing where the classification was finally approved. And then with that, formal bargaining began, and this is more Jarrell's wheelhouse, but they began in late July as opposed to soon after the June council date, just due to scheduling conflicts on the part of PPA representatives. And so here we are today after a 30-day ratification period with PPA. And so there have been, points at which this has been protracted because of, I think, the mechanics of this process. And
say no more.
Delays on, yeah, thank you.
It's because you have summarized my impression, which is that this was not what I went through a lot of trouble to bargain for in 2016. And so I will keep that in mind in the upcoming contract negotiations, and I'm sure all of us will. You mentioned uniforms. Where did you come down in terms of what these staff will be wearing?
Green polos or jackets and tan pants with like a patch that basically has the PPB logo.
It's kind of a cross between parks rangers and something else.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor.
Commissioner Udaly.
Thank you. So we will be hiring 12 PS3s, is that correct? I wasn't here in 2016, so I don't know how that number was arrived at, but I'm wondering if anyone has an opinion on whether that's an adequate number and can tell me how those PS3s will be distributed across the precincts.
I can speak to the first question, and I'll have Captain Hurley address kind of the distribution. I actually reviewed the June council hearing in preparation for this one, and Commissioner Salzman, you asked the same question then. There was no kind of magic number with 12. It was simply a resource issue with, how much money could be allocated for the program. The idea being that after data is collected, that an expansion of the program would be kind of assessed or reassessed.
Great.
So you asked, sorry, this is Captain Hurley. So you asked the question about how we're going to allocate. So they'll go to the precincts. There's 3 precincts, and we'll divide them most likely evenly through, but we actually are in the process right now with our Strategic Services Division pulling numbers, and we may end up actually with an additional one at East, which is busier than, say, North, which may not be as busy. Those are decisions that will come with the data as to when or where they are most needed, and then they will be divided in the busiest times of the day, right? So we'll have a couple of shifts, probably not a midnight shift, as usually the calls that they would be taking won't be coming in at 2 or 3 in the morning. But all of that will be based on police data of when those calls that are appropriate for them to take are coming in.
So you kind of led into my next question about data. I mean, we have existing data on the levels of priorities of calls, right? And we must have some sense of how many of these calls would be appropriate for a PS3 versus a sworn and armed officer. So I realize that we need to collect data after the initiative begins, but I am also curious if there's any kind of estimation on the impact on the workload of the officers once this work is delegated to the PS3s.
So those numbers we are looking at. One of the problems that we came across when we started looking at this data is the way that we classify things. So initially going into it, in my thought process, I'm looking at a priority 7, which is our lower priority calls for BOEC, and thinking those would be appropriate for PS3s. But after looking for how we prioritize things, that's really more about when or how quickly we expect someone to respond to the call. If it is a missing persons call, that's a very high priority for us, right? But that's still something that's appropriate for a PS3 to help with. So there, unfortunately, the way we pull our data in and put it in the system right now with priorities is difficult for us to just pull a number. We have this number, many priority 6s, right? So what we've done is we've sat down and gone through all of the priorities and kind of determined what of those types of calls would be appropriate for a PS3, and SSD is working on those numbers for us to determine, okay, this is a welfare check, but it's a welfare check that's not appropriate for a PS3, or it's a welfare check of an elderly person that is appropriate for that. And so, unfortunately, data isn't always brought in the way we need it to be. And so they're working on those numbers because we couldn't do it based on priority like we thought we might be able to. But we are working on that, and those numbers will come out.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be very curious moving forward, because really my greatest hope with the PS3s is that in delegating work to the PS3s, we can get a clearer picture of adequate staffing for actual sworn armed police officers, which is something that I don't feel like we've ever really arrived at. Is there a set plan for reporting back on the outcomes of this initiative that will be presented to council and available to the public?
We will do whatever you ask of us. So,
okay,
yes.
I'll be asking for that later. Okay. You talked to other unions to ensure we weren't infringing on their territory, but were any other unions considered for representation of the PS3s?
No other union was considered since it first established a part of PPA, but we wanted to include them to make sure that the job functions are not blurring the lines in regards to the work that they do. So that was
Sure.
really important to us.
Okay. And then my final question is, I see in the minimum qualifications required 2 years of work experience. I guess presumably that's any kind of work experience, but it does say which could include 2 years of military service or 4 years of reserve military service. Will there be any additional weight given to applicants who have military service in the hiring process?
Mark Amberg with the City Attorney's Office, Commissioner. I think the only preference would be under the Veterans Preference Law, which applies to any applicants. They would be given preference in accordance with the Veterans Preference Law.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly support developing job opportunities for veterans, but I think in this instance, I wouldn't want to see an emphasis on military service, given the concerns in the community about the increasing militarization of our police force and the intent of these positions to kind of build better relations with community members. Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
Captain, thank you for those questions. Commissioner Daly reminded me, you mentioned that they might be doing welfare checks on non-forceful entry, or what kinds of de-escalation training and crisis intervention training for people particularly experiencing mental or medical illnesses will these people get?
So we included the 40-hour CIT training, so they will be CIT trained before they leave the 6 weeks academy, so that's a piece of it. And then we have specific classes about some of the medical understanding that we give to Advanced Academy. Those will be done. That's only a couple-hour classes, but the 40-hour CIT class will be specific for that.
Yeah, if you, in your next report, do some analysis on whether the 6 weeks training is adequate enough, and in particular whether just 1 week of crisis intervention training and an hour or two of medical training is going to be sufficient.
You'd like me to do an analysis to determine that?
Yes.
Yeah, we can get you the exact hours.
Points of evaluations of, is that enough to prepare these people to go out and do the kinds of things that we're going to be asking them to do?
So looking at it and based on what we already give for a law enforcement, at this point in time, yes, I think it is. Again, 40 hours of CIT training is what we give our Advanced Academy students. So our officers that are headed out get a 40-hour class, so they're going to get that training. Now, at 16 weeks in the academy and stuff, of course, they get more of that training. Our expectation for a PS3 is if they end up on some of these calls that are escalating to that level, our expectation is that they will call law enforcement to come in and help.
But what's about medical training? How much medical training will they get?
They're going to have basics first aid classes, so they will have that, and they'll have some of our evaluation classes. But again, if it's rising to that level, they will have the understanding that the training for them will be to call medical or call to a law enforcement in order to intervene.
Right, that's my concern, is if they're checking on an elderly person who may be having some medical problems, obviously they're not going to diagnose and treat those problems, but they need to at least to be recognizing that they need to call, and that.
Yes,
might,
so I guess
so
that
that's
would be
what I'd like you to consider in your training evaluation. Do they need more?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Commissioner Fish.
So I'm curious, what other cities have programs like this that you've determined are successful and that we're modeling after?
Go through the research that we've done.
I didn't go through that part. That was the Bureau at that
So
time.
Portland's actually a little behind the curve on this. And Eugene has a program, I believe Bend does, San Jose, California, Lake Oswego does, and they're all kind of very successful. Gresham as well, and they're all very successful. And the challenge really has been for some of these programs in integrating CSOs in many of the jurisdictions, but they all have different names, honestly, into their agencies. There has been a concern with mission creep, for example, and so I think we've done a really good job with, in working with PPA and carving out duties to identify responsibilities for our PS3s that would not make mission creep an issue. And so this was kind of ratified with an overwhelmingly positive response among the PPA membership. And so, I think our Bureau members are looking forward to the inclusion of this program because they will have less administrative work to do in that regard. So, one of the other duties that PS3s can take care of, for example, is writing police reports. And so a lot of the time that our officers spend responding to non-emergency calls will be kind of passed on or delegated to PS3s. And I think with that, we'll see kind of a successful program here because this is helping our officers do their job and is also improving kind of community trust.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Daly.
So CIT crisis intervention training, is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. My last question is really just wanting to give the panel an opportunity to clarify a point of confusion in the public, and that's that these positions were meant to interact with or aid people in the midst of a mental health crisis. it's my understanding that that was not the original intent. And perhaps my colleagues who were here when it passed could speak to that.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. And they in fact won't be.
It won't be.
Yeah.
We're not looking for that.
To clarify, the crisis intervention training is for them to identify so that they understand what to do, not for them to actually be the ones that give care or do that. That's not the point. The CIT is for them to have an understanding.
Great, that's what I thought, but it's something it's one of those things that's come up repeatedly.
Thanks for
so,
asking.
Yeah, thanks for clarification.
Great. Thank you. How many people do we have signed up for public testimony, Sue?
We have 6 signed up.
Very good. Bring them on up, 3 minutes, name for the record. Please, when your time expires, that's when the red light comes on, please stop.
Will the first 3 come up? Dan Handelman, Philip Wolf, and John with Portland Resistance.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. I'm going to try to skip through a lot of our testimony that we sent you by email because some things came up during this testimony that changed it, but not our opposition to your passing this today. The previous discussion in June was on the consent agenda. There was no public involvement. There was no public involvement in the discussion of what these officers are going to do. The contract specified they're going to be community service officers. They're now being called specialists. So these are Portland Police Bureau personnel who are not officers. They're going to be basically enhanced desk clerks with pepper spray. There's been no discussion about how they're going to be held accountable if they do put their hands on a civilian or if they use that pepper spray. I want to know more about what accountability mechanisms there are. It is also really shameful that after what happened in 2016, that this was put on the consent agenda before and put on with no real lead up and no community discussion before today, and with a paperwork that says that this is mostly internal for the city. These are community officers. I mean, you said that they're not community police officers. All officers are community police officers. So this is about community policing, community engaged policing. So the community wasn't engaged in defining what they're going to do. And the fact that there's still confusion with Darrell Turner and the PPA about what they're going to do, I think Commissioner Fish was on the right track. You're going to end up with disputes about what they're supposed to be doing or not. And I think it would be good for us to have that clearly defined. But I think we in the community were hoping that they'd be doing more, that we are seeing too much of the armed police officers showing up at protest actions and whatnot and escalating situations just by their presence. We were hoping to see unarmed officers. In England, as we know, most of the bobbies do not carry firearms. Instead, we're having only 12 out of 900 officers who are going to be technically unarmed, even though they're going to actually have pepper spray on them. And there's discussions about maybe giving them tasers. It was only today that we learned that these officers specialists are not going through DPSST. One of the things that was discussed in the press that they might do is gather security footage, and that's something I thought that the forensics unit did already, and I don't understand why you'd have new non-sworn officers doing that when you already have a forensics unit. So we're really urging you to delay approving the contract until the community gets more of what we need, some of the things that didn't come up in the previous contract. And specifically, the Citizen Review Committee is asking you to change their standard of review, and they were told by somebody in this building, you have to wait till the contract comes up in 2020, and here we are revising the contract in the middle of the 4-year block. So it's clearly not fair to be making this change without discussing and opening up the rest of the contract and the things that caused all the disturbance and a great public outcry and the police shoving people down the stairs of this building and pepper spraying them out on the street. So I'm actually surprised there are not more people here today, but there was a very short turnaround. And we only learned this was coming up on the agenda on Friday. So I really urge you to answer some of these questions, specifically about the accountability issue.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is John. I'm representing Portland's Resistance. Members of council and Mayor Wheeler. Portland's Resistance calls for the council to oppose this amendment to the police union contract. This unnecessary giveaway to the the PPA, negotiated without transparency or community engagement and thinly veiled as an emergency, is a slap in the face to a city which has repeatedly voted for police reform. The 2016 contract was a disaster that keeps getting worse. Many of our members were involved in the community opposition surrounding the 2016 contract approval. At that time, it made no sense for Mayor Hales to rush through an agreement when Mayor-elect Wheeler had just won office in part by campaigning on police reform. With more than 6 months left on the contract, numerous individuals and organizations asked at that time, where's the fire? Why is this an emergency that needs to be rammed through despite community opposition and a lack of engagement in the process? At that time, the people of Portland were told that millions of dollars in 9% raises and other benefits for the PPA was a worthwhile investment because we were buying an end to the despised 48-hour rule and starting on community policing by having unarmed police respond to low-level calls. Well, as you know, the district attorney turned the 48-hour rule into something more like a 48-day rule. And now today, with scant community input and another agreement crafted in secret, the council is considering further concessions to the police union. Where are the people of Portland represented in today's decision? The people of Portland voted for police reform in 2016 and were denied a seat at the table. Organizations like the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, Don't Shoot, and NAACP, and the Albina Ministerial Alliance showed up to ask that the contract wait for the new mayor to take office. Mayor-elect Wheeler had campaigned in 2016 on actively demilitarizing the police, implementing mandatory body cams, and increased emphasis on de-escalation. Instead of delaying the contract adoption, community members were violently shoved and thrown out of the building to be gassed by the police force, so giddy about the contract that they adopted it with a record approval of 95%. The city did not drive a hard bargain in 2016, and the proposal before you today weakens the contract further. Now in 2018, the people of Portland historically elected the first African-American woman to serve on our council, a community activist, experienced policymaker, and outspoken police reform advocate. Commissioner-elect Hardesty's experiences and perspectives would be extremely valuable in this conversation. So why is today's proposal an emergency that can't wait another 6 weeks? The people of Portland have spoken and said that we want police reform with more transparency and accountability to the community. This proposal provides neither.
Thank you. Sue, can you scroll it? Is that possible? Oh, there it goes. It's doing it on its own.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you. Next three, please.
Next three, please. Peggy Zabrosky, Joe Walsh, and Maggie.
Can we bring the screen up again?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Peggy Zabrosky. I'm a citizen. And you all know what the community wants, or at least a large portion of the community, which is an unarmed police force. There are successful unarmed police forces in United Kingdom, Ireland, Norway, Iceland, and New Zealand, all of which countries have a far, far lower rate of murder than in the U.S., killing of one human by another. In Oregon, 27 officers have lost their lives, sadly. 27 officers since 1878. In Oregon, this year, 33 citizens have died at the hands of police. I am totally in favor of unarmed police officers. But I think if we put the officers in the way it's being described here, they become a poorly regarded adjunct to the regular police and not respected. I don't think that the described duties allow them the possibility of going into situations where we've previously seen citizens lose their lives and resolving them. I don't think this is answering our desire for police reform. Although I laud the intention, I don't think we'll get there this way, and that I wish you would look over this proposal and change it so that unarmed police officers are officers and have a leading role in our police force. I'm not comfortable having people with guns sitting behind me here. It's not comfortable, and we don't need it. There are situations in which people hurt other people and need to be shot, and you can have a special force that does that. But what we see at protests and in the community, especially in poor communities, especially in communities of color, is police escalation of situations. And so we really need to totally restructure, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Walsh, and I represent Individuals for Justice. There are so many loose ends on this. It feels like a dirty, filthy mop. That's what it feels like. You're going to take 12 people in the beginning, and you're going to disarm them, and you're going to send them in the community, I presume in uniform. I am not a big fan of the police department. Really not. I think most people know that. But I don't want somebody going up to somebody's door, knocking on the door, and getting blown away. And the person that's with him may get blown away because he doesn't have a gun. The whole setup is stupid. How stupid? I mean, are you guys trying to outdo Trump? That's how stupid this is. Why don't you give it to social services? Why don't you give it to the people on the street that know what's going on? Why do you give it to the cops, for God's sakes? The worst thing in the world is for a cop to come up to somebody and got a gun on his hip, or doesn't have a gun on his hip, has mace. What is the matter with you? You know, we come here over and over and over and beg you not to do this crap, and then you get into trouble, and then we come back and we say, we told you. We're now trying to get out of the JTTF, and we told you over and over again, don't join it. But you wouldn't listen. And now you got really nice people coming, Dan Handelman, logically presenting really good arguments to you. And what do? You sit there and you put it under an emergency, which means all 5 of you have to vote on this. Not one of you sitting there today says, what could go wrong here? Well, let me tell you, a whole bunch can go wrong. And we will nail you to the wall when it does. Because these guys, or women, are going to get the shit details. That's what they're going to get. They're going to get the details the cops don't want to do. And it's going to be a waste of money. It's going to be a waste of time. And I can't believe my buzzer has not gone off. It must be afternoon because I'm tired. But I'm tired of coming here time after time and telling you you're going to fall off the cliff, and you do, and then you get all upset when it hurts. Or you mumble when you leave meetings, Mayor.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, there's a couple of things. One, regarding the protesters. Now, when you have disabled people who come down and protest, who are in wheelchairs or walkers, or say they can't hear, or say they have difficulty verbalizing, and then you tear gas those people, or say they can't walk, like, physically, I would not be able to run away from a police officer. I'm that bad off. So I worry about disabled people being tear gassed who are not being violent. Like if I were to go down and sit down and protest somewhere with a sign, I would worry, about being pepper sprayed by an officer. I'm torn because I'm pro-gun control, but we're armed to the teeth in this country. So both what these people said are true. One is an unarmed officer could go up to a door and get blown away. And the other is, I've had people tell me that they feel safer in England because of the unarmed cops. Another issue is we've got 2 disabled women, one who didn't end up going to jail because she moved, who were kicked out of Directors Park. One was in a wheelchair, and she was kicked out of Salvation Army because she went to a hotel and then she tried to get back in, and she only got so many nights and was kicked out, and she ended up in Directors Park, and the cops came and kicked her out, and she left. But then there's another woman who I don't want to describe her too specifically because that would break her, privacy, but she's nonverbal in terms of being able to make sense, but she screams and she goes through the public garbage. And the thing is, she was in Directors Park and she was screaming, and so the unarmed park ranger called the police, and the police came and they arrested her. And the thing is I gave this woman a bag of chips, and we attempted to have some conversation, and she's not able to communicate verbally in a way that you and I would understand, but we were able to use hand signals, and I was able to get sort of the gist of her intention. And I worry about disabled people ending up in jail who are not able to communicate their intentions and ending up like maybe Sandra Bland, or you know, being physically at risk of dying or grave injury because they're not able to communicate with officers.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So.
And one more testifier, and that's Mary Sipe.
Very good. Thank you.
Oh, Mary, we haven't seen you in a while.
I know. I've had some other commitments that have kept me away, and I've missed you all. But I saw you Monday night. So my name's Mary Sipe, and before I say what I want to say, I want to throw out two questions that other people might have. Are park rangers sworn officers, and are they under the PPA?
No.
No, okay. And then also a question that came to my mind is, how does this training compare to the other programs that were mentioned, like in Eugene and Gresham and Lake Oswego? Might be interesting to take a look at that. I just have to say, you know, when I come here and I testify, I try to make informed decisions, and I try to do my research and understand, and today I'm a little bit confused. When I read this, it seemed very clear to me that this was pretty simple. Back in June, the decision about the public safety specialist was made. All of that's been done, and what we're looking at today is simply putting them under the PPA collective bargaining agreement. It seemed pretty clear and cut and dry. But then I have to say I was a little disappointed in that, you know, I read all 44 pages of this backup material and printed it and highlighted it and kind of understood it. And a lot of questions that were asked and a lot of comments that have been made today just kind of made it appear that not everybody has done as much research as I've done and understanding, and because there were a lot of questions that were asked that are right here in the materials. And I just, you know, kind of want to make sure that maybe we shouldn't be kind of slowing this down and taking a look at it and making sure that it's very clear what the duties, you know, of these unsworn officers are going to be, and that there isn't some conflict and some problems. I think Dan brought up some good points, and so I'm kind of like on the fence. I think I support putting this under, I think, the collective bargaining agreement. When I go through all this material, it seems appropriate to me. But then when all these other questions come up, I'm kind of like, well, you know, did this really go through due process, and are we really clear about everything? And is this job description and this training, is everything set in stone? Or do we need to kind of talk about this a little bit more? So,
very good.
Go.
Thank you. So why don't we bring the team back up, please? That, by the way, Sue, that was the list, correct? A public testimony. Very good. The list is closed. Why don't we bring the team back? I'm going to answer a couple of these questions. And I appreciate you, Mary, sort of teeing me up for what is actually in the material. So first of all, this is us going back to the Memorandum of Understanding, which is provided in the documents that have been provided to the public. And the very first exhibit, Exhibit A, which is referred to in the actual text of the agreement. The agreement is one page. On the back of the agreement, it is signed by representatives of the city, the police chief, Daryl Turner, who is the PPA president. It refers under the third item on the agreement. It says Public Safety Support Specialist Classification Specification is attached as Exhibit A. Exhibit A actually lists all of the specific functions And I'm going to read the entirety of it because I only gave you a subset of it. Write police reports for non-emergency situations that do not require police officer authority and do not involve potential evidence, suspects, or a crime scene. 2, respond to non-injury traffic collisions and facilitate information exchange between involved parties, coordinate tow services for disabled vehicles, conduct follow-up on property crimes where there is no specific suspect information either by phone or in person, with an emphasis on crimes victims' rights and referrals to other cities' bureaus as necessary. 4, process evidence or property, including writing reports and properly securing property. Number 5, attending neighborhood meetings, community and/or public events. This does not replace attendance at such events by sworn officers, and that is an important in paren. 6, assist police officers in searching for missing persons, such as elderly adults, medically fragile adults, or children, when there is no reason to believe that they're a threat to themselves or the community. 7, assist with inventory and maintenance of PPB-issued equipment, excluding weapons and ammunition. Number 8, assist drivers, installed vehicles, and summon other necessary assistance, respond to pedestrians, bicyclists, and other community members in need of assistance. 9, broadcast and receive messages via police radio and mobile data terminal, maintain contact with field units, ask for assistance when appropriate due to incident type and scope. 10, assist with temporary street closures, detours, and other public service duties identified by police supervisors. 11, summon a police officer for situations they encounter in which enforcement action is necessary. And then it goes on to do more description. In the same document, the question around accountability came up. PS3s are subject, and the officer will correct me, but Officer Hurley, PS3s are subject to all directives, the same as any police officer in the Bureau, and they go through internal affairs for accountability issues, the same as police officers. I could not answer the question about how training compares in, say, Eugene. I don't have that level of specificity. I don't know if Officer Hurley or Nick, if you... I'm Captain. I apologize, of course.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I apologize.
No worries at all. We created our training based on those job descriptions you just did. Our job descriptions are not the same exactly as those other areas, and so we looked specifically at what you wanted them to do, and we created a 6-week course to answer to that. So I don't know exactly what others train.
So is it also a fair statement, you know, the question came up, why the number 12? And there were 2 reasons in my mind why the number 12. Number 1, 12 is what we could afford in the budget cycle, given that we are also making a significant ask for sworn, trained, certified officers. But I also didn't want a large program rolling out. I wanted a small, effectively a pilot program, so we could find out what was working and where the glitches are. I think we all acknowledge with the new program being stood up, there will be glitches. And therefore, I wanted to be able to evaluate with a smaller group of people what was working, what wasn't working, how we needed to refine the training or the support systems or the protocols. So I wanted to get that on the record as well. Anything else?
I have a few
Commissioner
questions.
Daly, you bet. Thank you.
So it's this initiative, I think, originally was called for by the community. Community advocates wanted community service officers and community policing. Today, it feels like the goalposts are moving. I don't know if that's due to a lack of consensus within the community or a failure on our part to be clear about the intent and the process that we've gone through. So I have a few more questions to clarify some of that. Other than the name, what substantive changes have been made to the PS3 initiative between the time it was established 2 years ago in the contract and today?
I wasn't involved in the contract negotiations, so I can't speak to, as Commissioner Fritz can, for example, to what specifically kind of was laid out then or whatever the expectations were. My understanding from the very beginning, as far as my involvement is concerned, was that this was, part of the Bureau's community policing effort, and that we did not want desk clerks. We didn't want any paper pushers, so to speak. There really was a desire to have them out in the community serving as non-police first responders in non-emergency situations, and that has been consistent.
What concessions, if any, were made to the PPA? I mean, this did take a long time to work out, but it's been suggested we made concessions. Would you agree with that characterization?
No, I wouldn't agree with that characterization. We didn't make any concessions.
Okay. And it doesn't seem like Mr. Turner is really helping with the confusion on the matter. What kind of public engagement and involvement was undertaken in the last 2 years?
I think just kind of offline conversations, honestly. I mean, outside of kind of council hearings and again, the offline conversations, I wouldn't say that there have been any community forums, for example, on like this specific issue. And so we absolutely could have engaged kind of the public better around this, especially given that,
Nick, I have to interrupt you here. I profoundly disagree. I ran on this platform. I ran on this. I probably presented this 150 times at forums all throughout this community. And what I said was that at the time we were calling them community service officers. I guess if there's any concession we made, it was in the naming, calling them public safety support specialists, because the union was concerned that there would be a conflict between who is and who is not a police officer under the legal definition of a public safety officer in state statute. So there was that. But there is no question that this is consistent with 21st century policing, which is having more people who are in the field, who are not carrying firearms, who are there to help resolve conflict in the community or address issues of criminality but not related to emergency situations. So the kinds of things that are described in Exhibit A, which are the kinds of things that I've been talking about for at least 3.5, maybe 4 years at this point. We haven't moved off that ball at all.
My apologies, Mayor. My question was more to if any of our community boards, commissions, or committees had given input on the development of this job description.
But we don't usually have community engagement on contract negotiations. That's the job of HR, and it's our job to know what's going on in the community and to give them direction, but that's why we have executive sessions.
Well, I haven't had the pleasure of going through police union bargaining yet.
Oh, you're going to have that pleasure.
I am so excited, and thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. It sounds like we took what advocates said they wanted, and then we developed the positions. That is all. Thank you.
Further questions?
If I could just add to that,
Fritz, you bet.
The issues with the contract that people were so upset about was, one, paying an extra $6 million, a 9% raise in order to get rid of the 48-hour rule and to encourage recruitment, and two, body cameras and whether the officers would get to see the footage from the body cameras. This was not one of the big arguments. In fact, it was completely non-controversial. Everybody said, yes, this is a really good thing. We think we should do it. So I think it's really important to make that clear. Actually, I'm looking at Dan Handelman. You're right, Dan Handelman always has some concerns about various things, and so it was included in the things that you said. But as a general matter, in terms of things that people were yelling at me and giving me death threats for, this was not one of them.
Yeah, I'll just speak for myself. Most of the community feedback I've gotten on the PS3s is, what the heck's taking so long? Get on it. And so here we are. Any further questions? Sue, please call the roll.
Udaly.
First, I want to note the differing opinions we heard from community members today. We have some that want us to disarm our entire police force, and we have others who don't want these officers to be unarmed because they don't think it's safe. So as usual, we can't please all of the people all the time, but I honestly believe this is a positive step forward and will do good for the community and for the Bureau. The path to today's vote has not been easy, nor has it always been clear. It's important to me to acknowledge, as I mentioned earlier, that this was a result of a hard-fought victory by community advocates. I also want to honor the Community Service Program, as it was then called, which was a significant reason that one or more of my colleagues approved the 2016 Portland Police Association contract. I believe it's important for us to follow through on the implementation of a program that has been promised and in development for the last 2 years. I am one of those people that has been asking, why is this taking so long? The program will continue to evolve. I want to make a few final points before I cast my vote, mostly to clarify confusion in the community, and I wanted us to take the lion's share of the responsibility for that confusion. We are not doing a good enough job informing the public, let alone engaging them and meaningfully involving them. And I think it's crystal clear that, especially in issues that come when it comes to the police bureau, that we can never do too much. So I just want to acknowledge that. The PS3s are not the same as mental health first responders. They were never intended to be mental health first responders. I believe we need more of both, and I want to see clear steps that move us in that direction. The PS3s, however, will improve police service by helping to address the increasing number of low and medium priority calls, meaning that high priority calls are gotten to faster. Equally important, I hope the PS3s will improve community relations by normalizing the idea within PPB and throughout the city that every call for service does not require a response by an armed officer. 2, I'm disappointed once again by Darrell Turner's mischaracterization of the city's actions and the true job function of the PS3s. I am now officially asking for a report in 1 year that can be shared with the public that will demonstrate the outcomes from this initiative. 3, I am not convinced these positions need to be represented by the PPA. I understand that council made this decision in 2016, but I believe AFSCME, SEIU, or potentially a laborers union would be better suited to represent positions PPA has no experience with. I will expect to revisit the PS3 program when we begin to negotiate the next police union contract. And I intend to also engage other unions to see whether there may be a better alternative. 4, and finally, I want to flag a concern with the fact that the section for minimum qualifications, and I brought this up earlier, specifically calls out military service as acceptable job experience. I fully support efforts to create employment opportunities for veterans, and I understand we, by law, have to abide by the veterans' preference policy. However, I hope that hiring committees will consider the intent of these positions, community desires, and give equal weight to a diverse range of job experiences, such as social workers. It's clear that the work is only beginning. I want to give special thanks to Nicole Grant from the Mayor's Office for getting us to this point. I look forward to having meaningful engagement with my colleagues and the community as we chart our path forward together. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for all those comments, which I support, Commissioner Daly. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for bringing this over the first hurdle, not really the finish line, because there's more to do. But after 2 years, we are going to be able to start this program up. Thank you, Nicole Grant, for your I would say tireless work, but I think it's been very tiring. I appreciate it very much, as well as yours, Gerard Gaddis and Mark and Captain Hurley, and the Police Bureau. Contract negotiations, you never get everything you want, and I think there was some discussion about whether having the Portland Police Association represent these folks was the right choice. my concern about that has only been confirmed with the misrepresentation by the police union and the amount of time that it's taken to do this. And that will certainly be part of my consideration when we start up contract negotiations again. But again, that contract was about increasing the pay, getting rid of some of the most egregious problems in terms of discipline and other grievances, with a view to adequate staffing of police, both sworn and unsworn officers. Because in other venues, when we go out into the community, oftentimes when we have community communications here at council, we hear from people, why are you not looking after us in our neighborhoods? We hear, why are you not responding to our calls when there's so many people, police officers downtown at demonstrations? And this will help. We do have more sworn positions now. We have more positions. We have 90 vacancies now in the sworn positions, so there's still more to do, but still we have more officers, more positions than we did in 2016. And so to my mind, at least part of the intent of the contract has been successful in improving our staffing, and I know that this is going to help more. And I do want to thank Mary Sipe for, as usual, your thoughtful testimony. You mentioned park rangers. That was part of one of my concerns in the discussions over the last many months, that we not duplicate, in particular that we not make these positions such that they would poach our park rangers. And I think that, Jarrell, you've done a really fine job of doing that in partnership with the Parks Bureau staff. So thank you for that. And I'm relieved that we're finally getting going on this. Thank you to Christina Nevis and my staff who works on police issues, and Tim Crail, my chief of staff, who was one of the chief insisters on having this program in the contract. Aye.
Fish.
Well, I want to begin by thanking the mayor in his opening statement and then the panel for clearing up a lot of the confusion. And I share Commissioner Udaley's ongoing concern that we find ways of better communicating with the public and with key stakeholders. I will say in the 10 years I've been on this council, it's never been more difficult for a variety of reasons, some structural, some just the nature of the world we live in. But I do think that this hearing served a useful purpose in clarifying some of the issues. So I want to thank everyone who participated. And I just want to be very clear. The community advocated successfully for the creation of these positions. We agreed to fund these positions in the last budget. Today, we're taking we also previously crafted the positions, and that came to us over the summer, the classifications. Today, the action before us is whether to amend a contract with the Portland Police Association to actually implement these classifications and move this project forward. A piece of a reform agenda which is long overdue, and as the mayor noted, he not only ran on this, but there's been a sense of impatience on this council about us rolling this out. That's the step we're taking today. And following this vote, we need to implement the program, and we need to show some success to the public, and if necessary, make changes. So with that understanding of what brought us here, I vote aye.
Saltzman.
Well, I just think, as has been said by my colleagues, I think these jobs are designed to reduce conflict in the community, but also to make the job of our highly trained police officers, who we spend a lot of time on money in getting them to be highly trained and skilled, to do their jobs better too. So I think this is a good program, and I wish it all the success. Aye.
Wheeler.
There have been two important waypoints that we've passed this week related to public safety in the Portland Police Bureau. And I'll tell you as mayor, there is nothing that I do or that my team is engaged in that is more fraught with peril than police matters. And I think I've been crystal clear that I have a lot of respect for Chief Outlaw and the men and women of the Portland Police Bureau. The job they do is extremely difficult and often dangerous. But to strengthen the Police Bureau and keep it relevant and make sure that it continues to be a leading bureau, we also need to be accountable, and we also need to be responsive, and we need to be reflective of the community that we serve. Earlier this week, we had the first meeting of our community group, the PSEP, and it went very well, and the conversation for those who participated was positive, and they picked their leadership, and the feedback I've received has been overwhelmingly positive. Here we are now supporting the PS3 program, which, as many people have said, it's a beginning. Yes, it's a waypoint, but it's a beginning. But I think it's an important beginning, and I think it's a strong statement about how we want our police bureau to evolve in the years ahead to become stronger, more connected with the community, more relevant, and more accountable. And what both of these waypoints have in common, the PSEP earlier this week having their first meeting, and this today, is that Nicole Grant has been running the traps on both of them. And that is not to say that everybody else in this room, all of you who are here on this panel, we couldn't do it without you, without the expertise, the leadership, the support that you brought to the table. But this woman has bled this project. She's cried this project. She's fought hard for this project. She's advocated tirelessly for this project for the last 2 years. And I've watched her do it. And it's been a thing of beauty. Nick, I owe you, I'll call it a mini apology, or maybe one beer paid forward. I interrupted you during your testimony. I will not do that again. That was rude and unprofessional, and I apologize. However, I was jazzed because this is something I've really been talking about a lot in the community. But you deserve a shout out today for your leadership and your contributions to the community. I vote aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Yeah, can we take a 2-minute break, please? We'll take a 2-minute recess. session. Next item, please, which is 1252.
Item 1252, authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County to transfer daily administrative functions of the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services from the City of Portland to Multnomah County, and to establish the financial structure that will allow both the city and the county to continue to contribute financially to the successful operation of the Gateway Center.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to start by moving to replace Exhibit A with the substitute Exhibit A. There was a technical change on page 6 and 7 of this intergovernmental agreement, providing for 2 installment payments to the county instead of 1 lump sum. This will help to better track and account for any carried over funds in this agreement. So
Second.
I'll move that. Okay.
We have a
thank you.
motion from Commissioner Saltzman, a second from Commissioner Fish. Call the roll on the substitute.
Aye.
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 All right, the substitute's on the table.
Okay, thank you. The Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services was created in 2009 as a one-stop triage center for survivors of domestic violence and their children. It was formed by the City of Portland in partnership with Multnomah County. The center is a convenient and comfortable setting to access a variety of services, including crisis and safety planning, restraining order applications, crime reporting and prosecution, assistance with custody or divorce and other civil legal assistance. Okay. Center staff and the agencies at the facility use a survivor-driven service model and recognize that survivors are the experts in their own lives. They work to ensure that the survivors at the Gateway Center are closely integrated with the public safety system, and they have been successful in that effort. Almost 1 in 4 referrals excuse me, to the center comes from police officers, and now more than half of all protective orders or temporary restraining orders in Multnomah County are filed at the Gateway Center itself with the assistance of center staff. Rather than coming down to the county courthouse, the Gateway Center is a much more comfortable environment for a survivor to obtain a restraining order. And since its creation in 2009, the Gateway Center has provided services to 25,000 survivors in crisis. On average, the Gateway serves 4,000 survivors per year, of whom more than 50% are people of color. These survivors often visit the center multiple times to receive advice, services, and, as I mentioned earlier, obtain restraining orders. Since its inception, the city and county have jointly supported the center, with the city providing the funding and oversight of the center's operations, and the county providing access and certain information technology. And the county also owns the property that the center is located at and provides security officers and also staff from the district attorney's office. The center has an advisory committee, which is co-chaired by a member of the city council and a member of the Multnomah County Commission. While reviewing the Gateway Center's provisions in the previous intergovernmental agreement in September of 2018, the city and county concluded that the center and its participants would be better served by an overhaul to the center's administrative structure, merging it with the county's Department of Human Services. The county already supports programs and departments providing complementary services, and also has expertise in administering programs that must comply with the same regulations that are applicable to the center. So merging the center with the county's Department of Human Services will enable the center and its partners to focus more fully on improving outcomes for participants rather than on administration. So I hope that my colleagues will join me in voting yes to support this today. And I believe we're going to start by inviting up County Chair Deborah Kafori, who's been a great partner in this effort here. Martha Strawn-Morris, the Director of the Gateway Center, and Pam Hahn, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Pam Hahn is with Legal Aid, and Legal Aid is one of our participants at the Gateway Center, as well as serving on the advisory committee. Start with you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm Deborah Kafori, your Multnomah County Chair. Unfortunately, the rates of domestic violence in our county are staggering, with nearly 1 in 4 women experiencing domestic violence during adulthood. This is an issue that affects all of us. And it was with that in mind that nearly 10 years ago, Commissioner Saltzman led the formation of the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services. In doing so, the City of Portland and Multnomah County took an important step to providing a hub where survivors of domestic violence can access the critical services that they need during what can be one of the most terrifying, dangerous, and loneliest times of their lives. The Gateway Center has become a national model for services. In one place, survivors can access culturally responsive services, they can obtain a restraining order, receive mental health services, and engage in safety planning services. Moving the administration of the center from the City of Portland to Multnomah County's Youth and Family Services Division just makes sense. Our Domestic and Sexual Violence Coordination Office already coordinates with the center and our partner organizations to provide many of the services offered within. And as the region's safety net, Multnomah County has ample expertise in the provision of social services. By transitioning the administration of the Gateway Center to the county, I am confident the excellent level of service already provided to survivors will only continue to improve. Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for your tireless dedication to this issue, for your vision, for your passion, and your commitment to ensuring that survivors have the critical resources they need and a welcoming place to access them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners, I'm Martha Strawn-Morris, and I'm the Director of the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services. And assuming approval of this agreement come January 1, I will still be the Director of the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services, only I'll work for the county instead of the city. And first, importantly, I want to thank you for your enduring commitment to the Gateway Center and the survivors that we serve. As indicated by the numbers that both commissioners have shared, your investments go a long way and serve a lot of people. And as a frontline worker, I assure you that your support is both changing and saving lives. When Commissioner Saltzman first fought for and won support for the Gateway Center, there was some skepticism about whether this was the best investment of city funds if the goal was to serve survivors of domestic violence. Commissioner Saltzman saw that the city had an opportunity to essentially prove the concept's worth. And now, 9 years later, there is no question that the Gateway Center is a valuable and vital component within our larger service continuum. So with the Gateway Center's worth and position well established, it's time to move alongside the local team of public servants who specialize in services for domestic and sexual violence. Those experts, in large part, work for the county. Our county, Multnomah County, has been a national leader in this field for many years and continues to be on the cutting edge when it comes to serving survivors. I'm excited to have the Gateway Center become part of the county's Domestic and Sexual Violence Coordination Office. There is strength in numbers, and when it comes to serving survivors, the numbers are clearly on the county side. I know the Gateway Center will only get stronger with this move and be even better equipped to serve survivors. I want to thank you, Chair Kafori. Without your support, we absolutely would not be sitting here. It's really, really appreciated. The crafting of this agreement made urgent work for many people on both sides of the river, and the effort was a really stellar example of what two bureaucracies can accomplish when working cooperatively towards the same goal. And I really appreciate everybody who helped, but particularly Ashleen Coughlin from Saltzman's office, Commissioner Saltzman's office, and Liz Smith-Curry from Chair Kafori's office, and Robert Taylor from the City Attorney's office. And I also want to say thank you to my longtime finance team of Jen Raines and Ben Smith, who are also here today. And though I'm technically going to move over, and these investments are moving over, I want you to know that my stewardship of these investments will not change. I will continue to do everything in my power to ensure the highest and best use of these funds. And I look forward to staying connected to this council through my relationship with the commissioner named as the co-chair to the Gateway Center Advisory Council, and will happily report to this body with the county support on request at any time. And finally, I just want to say my deepest thanks to Commissioner Saltzman for his vision and leadership and partnership on this project. I really can't say enough to thank you. I would note that your integrity and heart have been an inspiration, and your leadership will continue to influence me for all of my days. It's been my absolute honor to have worked together with you to build the Gateway Center. In my experience, you've been exclusively guided by what would be best for the people we are trying to serve. Your leadership has meant that generations of citizens will have improved well-being and a higher quality of life. And I'm so proud to have the opportunity to carry on your work. And I believe that my ability to do so will be enhanced and improved by this move over to the county. So I want to thank all of you for your support of our work and this agreement.
Thank you, Martha. Ms. Hahn?
Good afternoon. My name is Pam Hahn. I'm a supervising attorney with the Portland Regional Office of Legal Aid Services of Oregon. I've been representing survivors of domestic violence and family law and protective order proceedings for almost 20 years. Legal Aid has long participated in the coordinated community response to domestic violence and has been on the ground at the Gateway Center since it opened its doors. Funding from the city has allowed Legal Aid to add staff and increase the critically needed assistance that we are able to provide to survivors of domestic and sexual violence through the Gateway Center. We currently have Legal Aid staff on site at the center 4 days a week and have close to 1,000 appointments with survivors each year at the center. It is now our primary, although not our sole, means of intake for survivors in Multnomah County. Domestic violence agencies and culturally specific organizations know they can send clients to Gateway for immediate access to legal assistance with confidence that they will receive trauma-informed care in a safe environment. The co-location of various agencies at the Gateway Center allows our staff to be able to provide more holistic services for clients by referring them to partner agencies when we identify needs while meeting with clients, whether it is counseling, state benefits, meeting with the DAs, housing assistance. Rather than just providing phone numbers to our clients, we can set them up with appointments with partner agencies to meet their needs on site. The Gateway Center is a vital community resource assisting survivors in achieving safety by accessing services from multiple agencies without having to run around town for various appointments while trying to balance their work schedules, childcare, and public transportation. Navigators efficiently access the client's needs and refer them to appropriate partner agencies. The center is well integrated into the larger domestic violence continuum, which helps ensure that appropriate services are provided as efficiently as possible in a survivor-centered and warm setting. The current structure for providing services at the center has been developed over the last several years and adapted to the needs of the clients and of the service agencies. Community partners who either provide services on site or refer clients to the center have an expectation that although the management of the center may be shifting to the county, it will continue to function in the professional and high-quality manner that it has under the city's administration. In addition to direct representation of survivors, I have also been deeply involved in the coordinated domestic violence response in Portland and in Multnomah County. I currently serve on the executive committee of the Multnomah County Family Violence Coordinating Council, and I'm a past chair of that council. I also serve on the Multnomah County Fatality Review and the consulting committee for the Domestic Violence Enhanced Response Team. As part of that larger domestic violence response in our community, I have a deep familiarity with the domestic violence services provided by the county, and in particular with the role of the county's Domestic and Sexual Violence Coordination Office, or DSVCO. The DSVCO plays a leading role in ensuring that domestic violence services and responses in the community are coordinated and collaborative. Their expertise will help ensure that the services provided at the Gateway Center are well integrated into the larger community response. I would like to conclude by thanking the city, and in particular Commissioner Salzman, for their ongoing support for the Gateway Center, as well as the legal services provided there by our agency. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So I have a question, and I don't know whether this goes to the county chair or to the administrator, but, and I'm going to support this IGA, and it makes perfect sense, it seems to me, to transfer the operations to the county in the way that's proposed. But during these conversations, was there any thought given to spinning off the Gateway Center as an independent 501c3? And is it possible that that discussion could arise sometime in the future? And may there be some benefit of having it operate independent of local government?
Maybe I could probably answer that. So when the Gateway Center started, and the whole planning process around it started back in probably 2007, a lot of the existing 501c3s were very concerned about the Gateway Center coming on the scene, primarily because they felt it was going to interfere with their fundraising efforts. So we have made a commitment at the outset, although we do have a 501c3 that's already part of the Gateway Center. It's very limited, and it's not an agency, or we don't solicit money from anybody, but every once in a while people want to give us money, so we're set up to receive it. But that was sort of one of the covenants we entered into with the existing providers, is we wouldn't compete against their efforts to raise money for their missions.
And if I could add, Commissioner Fish, that being part of the institutional response to domestic violence, I think, is really important. As we've mentioned a number of times here, we're the premier access point for restraining orders in Multnomah County, which requires an ongoing partnership with the Multnomah County Circuit Court. And I'm very confident that they wouldn't let a satellite courtroom, or they would struggle with partnering with a 501c3 for a satellite courtroom, sort of similar, where we have a very important role as an adjunct institutional response that I really believe requires government backing.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions? Commissioner Fritz.
I have a question about funding. I noticed that we're transferring 826,000, or nearly 827,000 ongoing that was part of the city's budget into the county's budget, which is of course appropriate. There's an additional question of a 62,000 ongoing to fund an administrative supports position that's currently one-time. What happens if the city doesn't have any ongoing money?
No, as part of this agreement, we are funding that position at an ongoing level.
The city,
that's outside of the budget process and commits next year's council to fund it.
But page 2 at the very bottom, Commissioner Fritz, actually quantifies the city baseline support level at $943,415. So the way I read that is it's the ongoing funding plus the administrative support position plus administrative services all rolled into one.
How does that work in terms of budgeting authority, notice, all those kinds of things? We're essentially approving an ongoing funding in a hearing.
Well,
like this.
I guess it's
an
aspirational, it's aspirational, but it's also a commitment that we are making, I think, to the county, that to compensate them both for some of the administrative overhead that we currently pay to ourselves for the Gateway Center, and to make the one of 4 positions at the Gateway Center that's one-time funded, make it ongoing, because it is it's a frontline position that's very important to survivors.
And is the city budget office aware of this?
I see our director
Yes.
nodding her head, yes.
Yeah, maybe once this panel's done, I could get Jessica to answer that question. Thank you.
Any further questions for this panel? Jessica, why don't you come on down? Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair Kafori, for being here.
Thank you for being here, Director Kennard.
Good afternoon, Council. Jessica Kennard, Interim Budget Director. Yes, so there is an ongoing funding need as part of this agreement that Council is committing to today, and that will need to come forward through the Direction to Develop process with the 1920 budget development.
I thought we couldn't commit future councils to make decisions like that.
So I believe under the terms of the IGA, it's not a forced commitment, but you are committing with this IGA to that funding level. And if that funding level is not provided as part of the budget, then I believe under the terms of the IGA is dissolved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Public testimony.
2 testifiers, Joe Walsh and Mary Sipe. Please come up.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon again. And I'm still Mary Sipe. I'll go ahead and get started just to move things along. Again, I did some review of this agenda item, and it seems very appropriate to me, and I just want to express my support. It's kind of ironic. The reason I missed this morning's city council meeting was because I was at the courthouse helping a friend file for a restraining order in a domestic violence situation. So I'm really supportive of the work that the Gateway Center does, and anything to make them financially strong and to support the success, I totally am in favor of. It's kind of funny, as I was sitting here, I was thinking about, I have a deep, dark secret that I've kept for over 30 years, and that's that I was a victim of domestic violence. And probably I'm not a person that you would expect to hear that from. And it just tells me how important these services are. If I had not had the opportunity, I mean, I did most of what I needed to do to get myself out of my situation myself, but had I not had the services available to me to learn from somebody, to go to them and figure out how do I do this safely and what do I do? And so I strongly support this, and thank you for the work that you're doing, and keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Walsh, and I represent Individuals for Justice. This is going to be an unusual presentation because Mary and I rarely agree on things. So I agree with everything she just said. This is really a good idea, at least what's on paper so far. I wish them well. And every once in a while, you guys do something that makes me smile, and this is one of them. I hope. I would really like to keep the smile on this issue for a long time because it's important. And I wanted to testify because I want the community involved in this stuff. And I don't know all of the reasons why the community is not down here backing this, or the community is not here objecting to it, whatever their opinion is. It's left to a lot of us activists, and Commissioner Fish is getting tired of us being here. So those people that are watching this, I would plead to you, whether you agree with us or disagree, please come, because I get tired of me. So please come. And I would thank all of you, which is a rare occasion also, if you support this and you transfer the administrative ability over to the county and you pay for it and you make sure they don't run out of money. We have great faith in the county in this. We hope they do a good job. Thank you for your patience, and I'm giving you back time. It must be that in the afternoon time goes slower, because this never happens to me in the morning. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion, any further questions? Sue, please call the roll.
Udaly.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Commissioner Saltzman for helping shepherd this into existence. I want to thank Chair Kafori and the county for receiving it. I know that you will be excellent guardians. I had the pleasure of touring the facility last year with Commissioner Saltzman, and besides it just feeling like a very safe welcoming, cozy space for families. I was especially impressed with the satellite courtroom. I know as someone who has had to access legal assistance and appear in court, that's a very intimidating and sometimes unsafe space for victims to be. So I would certainly want to see that continue. This is obviously an issue that hits close to home for a lot of us. If we haven't experienced domestic violence ourselves, then it's very likely that we know someone who has, and this is some of the most important work that we can do as government. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Thank you to each of our honoured guests, and thank you that we know it's going to be in really good hands moving forward and the right hands moving forward. So thank you for that. Commissioner Saltzman, I remember the day that we opened this. I was honoured to be there as a new commissioner, and this is part of your legacy, and it's really demonstrating what a white male ally does in supporting people of colour, women in particular, in our community, and making sure that everybody has the services that they need to survive and thrive. So thank you for all of your work on this, including this one. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for your partnership with Commissioner Saltzman in getting it over to the county and into safe hands. Not that it wouldn't have been in safe hands with us, but I think nobody would dispute that no subsequent city commissioner could possibly be more enthusiastic about it than Commissioner Saltzman, and so therefore it's kind of like a mic drop occasion. Thank you. Aye.
Fish.
Well, Dan, congratulations on your stewardship of Gateway Center for Domestic Violence. I know you've done a couple of exit interviews recently, and I wasn't there in person, but some of the feedback I've heard is that you look to both the Gateway Center and the Children's Levy as among your greatest accomplishments. And this certainly would not have happened without your perseverance and persistence. And I've sat next to you for 10 years, so I know something about your persistence. And your sense of humor, which I think is underrated, by the way, I would say, generally. As long as I'm on the council, I will support the city's baseline support level, although I do think the county got off a little easy with the county baseline support level, because I've read this paragraph, I don't know what it means. So hopefully we won't have litigation over that, Deborah, but it looks a little looser. We actually have a number. Yours is more aspirational. But this program does a lot of good in our community, and one way we can honor Dan's legacy on this council is to make sure it continues to thrive. So, and as Commissioner Fritz said, in transferring over to the county, we know under Deborah's leadership, it will be in good hands. So I'm pleased to vote aye.
Saltzman.
Well, thank you, colleagues. And I want to just start by thanking the team of people who worked to put this intergovernmental agreement together at the city and some at the county, too. And I'll start with Chair Kafori herself. When I approached her earlier this year about this notion, it was during a holiday. I know you were somewhere else, and we talked via the phone, and I think she said, well, let me think about it. But before she could really think about it too long, she called me back and said, yes, let's do it. So it didn't take her long to get there, and I'm very appreciate her support. And the one thing Chair Kafori and I agreed on right away was that we should get Aisling Coughlin involved in making sure this effort really comes to fruition, because we know sometimes the county and the city, despite their best intentions, sometimes things can bog down and dissipate. So Aisling, who is my former chief of staff and a very good friend of Chair Kafori's, agreed to take this position, and she has done a great job in shepherding this on time and on budget.
Two good things.
So thank you, Aisling. I want to thank Robert Taylor of the City Attorney's Office, Ben Smith. Ben Smith is with OMF. Ron Zito is with Bureau of Human Resources. Jen Ford with the Office of Management and Finance. Andrea Barraclaw with the City Attorney's Office. Heidi Brown is also City Attorney's Office. And then I just also wanted to acknowledge Liz Smith Curry, too, for her efforts on the county side to get this agreement. And then finally, and last but not least, Martha Strawn Morris, who has been the director of the center virtually from its inception, and she has done a great job in taking what was maybe a great idea, or a good idea, and really making it operational. You know, finding the people, establishing the protocols, getting navigating the other nonprofits on board with this idea. As I just mentioned to Commissioner Fish, there was some resistance to this idea. But so at a time, sometimes there was a time back in 2007, maybe I wondered whether the Gateway Center was ever going to come into existence. Today, I think everybody agrees. No one can believe we didn't have the Gateway Center years before we did. They can't envision a system that serves domestic violence survivors well now without the Gateway Center. So that's a real testament, I think, to Martha's good work. And we are part of the established system right now, and that's great. So I'm very pleased to support this agreement. Aye.
Wheeler.
Well, there's very little I can say that my colleagues have not said better than I possibly could. But once again, here we are, Dan, near the end of your tenure, talking once again about something that would not have happened but for you having the courage and the commitment and the tenacity to carry it off. Earlier today, we were talking about the preference policy that would not have happened without Commissioner Saltzman's, at the time, very courageous leadership to see that through. Chair Kafori and I were joking earlier because we've gone to a number of events together this week, and they seem to have you as the intersect, and here we are again today. And of course, earlier in the week, we were talking about the children's levy as being something that would not have happened but for your persistence and your vision. So once again, Commissioner Saltzman, I'll just say this. We're going to miss you. This community will miss you. But the legacy obviously is going to continue to live on. There isn't a better partner for this than Multnomah County and Chair Kafori. I think this is a center of target, perfect fit. I'll just make a commitment today, and that is, as long as I am the mayor of the city, we will live up to our end of this deal. We will meet our commitment target. We'll continue to work with you at the county and make sure that the Gateway Center continues to be as successful as possible. And who knows, in the years ahead, maybe we'll be successful enough that we can close it. So thanks, Dan, for your leadership. Thank you, Chair, for your leadership. Thanks to everybody who worked so hard on this. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner Fritz. Next up, 1253.
1253, authorize $130,000 total in grant funds for the Constructing Civic Dialogues Grant Program in the Office of Community and Civic Life.
Commissioner Daly.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Oh, good. I was looking around the room for Director Ree. There she is. So previously, then, Office of Neighborhood Involvement had long invested in neighborhood mediation services to help Portlanders work through conflict. As I said during the hearing on the Bureau name change, becoming the Office of Community and Civic Life is about much more than rebranding. Instead, the new name signifies our intent to revisit all of our current practices and partnerships to ensure they are truly in alignment with our mission to serve all Portlanders in our efforts to connect them to each other and the government. Today's ordinance reflects one of these changes. With that, I'd like to introduce our panel for today. Everyone please come forward at the same time. Today's presenters are Director Suk Ree, Carrie Coe, Rachel Bernstein, and Brandon Lee.
Well, the good news is late on Wednesdays, we have plenty of chairs. Take your pick.
This over
Okay. Yes. Good afternoon, Commissioners and Mayor. My name is Sukri, and I have the pleasure of serving as Director for the Office of Community and Civic Life. Today, our team will present for your approval 5 investments through the Bureau's Constructing Civic Dialogues program. These investments focus on providing training and support to the volunteer leaders who serve their neighborhoods, communities, and city. You will hear from staff about the program, grant partners, and how it works in practice. And then 2 of our community partners proposed for funding will speak to what they offer to Portlanders. And I will share with you how and why we have reimagined what was previously our neighborhood mediation program into what we are now calling Constructing Civic Dialogues. As you may know, the Bureau and the city have been investing in mediation services for at least 2 decades. Since fiscal year 2002-2003, we have allocated more than $4 million, an average of $240,000 per year. As best as we can reconstruct from final reports, this was an average of 119 mediation cases per year. And we've gleaned from the reports that only 1 mediation was done in a language other than English, and that was in Spanish, and that was last year. Also, over the past 2 decades, we have become wiser across many sectors of our society about the benefits of early investment, whether it is in early education and early life, preventative health care, maintaining roads and bridges before the point of failure, or saving for retirement sooner rather than later. Civic Life has applied this upstream thinking to the $260,000 line item for neighborhood mediation this year. Rather than investing all our limited resources for when individuals cannot effectively communicate to the point that they seek third-party intervention, we propose to invest half of those resources to go upstream. So this year, $130,000 remains dedicated to providing mediation services for individuals, neighbor to neighbor. Resolutions Northwest, our partner for 20 years, continues in this role. And this year, we're proposing that $130,000 be dedicated to equipping our volunteer leaders working in neighborhood and community groups, often on topics of importance to the city, to prevent and better manage conflict, as well as build group practices that promote healthy difference and dialogue. And we are very excited to share that these services will also be offered in Spanish, Arabic, Somali, and with American Sign Language, reaching communities we have not previously served through this program. Upstream approaches by design also reach more people than downstream approaches targeted for individuals. This is reflected in the final report for fiscal year 17-18. Resolutions Northwest reported that they provided 84 closed mediation cases, so approximately 168 individuals. They also reported 155 hours of closed facilitation cases serving 745 people. Further, we know that many conflicts are actually inaccurately characterized as tension between individuals when they're actually symptoms of structural or systemic conditions. For example, many conflicts reflect dynamics of gender, race, income, power, and ability, and these flare-ups between individuals are often symptoms of deeper and underlying dynamics within groups. I think we could all think of an example when an individual or individuals became the casualty of group dysfunction. Constructing Civic Dialogues invests in both helping to prevent communities from falling into the river, as well as helping to pull them out downstream. We must acknowledge that the level of tension we are experiencing in the community is not simply about individuals who do not get along. There are larger dynamics at play. Our response must include investing in our collective capacity to create positive conditions for civic dialogue. Thank you for your attention as our team and community partners present this ordinance for your approval.
All right, hello, I'm Carrie Coe with the Office of Community and Civic Life, and I support the Constructing Civic Dialogues program. I'm going to offer some information about the program, the partners, and the outcomes. So Constructing Civic Dialogues intends to build community capacity to promote the common good. Our guiding purpose is to foster the understanding of different perspectives, generative public dialogue, and constructive conflict to lay the foundations for a Portland where we all belong. In practice, this means equipping city employees to facilitate more productive and useful interactions between different perspectives that also recognize systemic conditions. It means developing within city networks the tools for culturally appropriate conflict resolution. And it means putting our equity intentions and goals into practice through prioritizing upstream work like disability culture, justice-oriented community engagement, and inclusion-centered dialogue. Our community partners bring the expertise of their staff and trainers to enable the city to better meet our goals. In this time of divisiveness and hateful fervor and systemic support for calling people's very dignity and lives into question, supporting constructive conflict and employing a multicultural approach to our programming matters to Portlanders. This is an opportunity to enact a positive vision of good governance and, practically speaking, to increase the number of partners and program styles to enable us to reach a wider audience. The current project timeline begins January 1st and ends June 30th, 2019. In that time, our plan is to work with 5 grant partners to serve 1,600 people through 73 opportunities for training, dialogue, conversation, services, and events. Civic Life sought applications from community entities with demonstrated experience in the following areas: in applying equity and inclusion to civic processes, to fostering interconnected communities and a sense of belonging amongst diverse members, and providing multicultural, multilingual, and community-specific engagement. Out of 24 applications with asks of over $900,000, the Grant Selection Committee recommends the funding of these 5 applicants. The Aorta Collective is a queer, multiracial, and feminist organization devoted to social justice. They work from an intersectional approach to liberation through training, consulting, and facilitation. They will focus their work on conflict resolution and facilitation skill building through 6 workshops and post-training consultant support. The Disability Art and Culture Project addresses disability culture, disability justice, intersectional identities, access, intimacy, and advocacy. They will provide 5 workshops that go beyond the logistics of accommodations and into access intimacy, a phrase that was coined by Mia Mingus that embodies, quote, a sense of freedom, bringing people closer to build and deepen relationships, end quote. Oregon Humanities. They are a nationally recognized leader in creating spaces and training facilitators who can hold generative spaces for conversation, learning, and the cross-pollination of ideas. They offer an approach that centers on rigor and face-to-face engagement to dig into challenging and important topics. They will be offering 50 facilitated conversations with 1,000 participants on a variety of topics and training 50 facilitators. Training for Transformation. They use experiential learning, equity expertise, and trauma-informed practices to develop and facilitate courageous conversations, courageous dialogues. They have a long history of leading equity work in public institutions, and their project will focus on offering workshops on racism and trauma to raise awareness, increase understanding, and build tools for resiliency. The Vanport Mosaic. The Vanport Mosaic celebrates community history by elevating and preserving the stories of those often marginalized to create a future where we all belong. Their award-winning work has grown from a singular oral history project into an annual week-long festival of memory activism. They'll be hosting 5 facilitated story circles with different cultural communities and an engaged audience of listeners to harvest an understanding of different cultural approaches to conflict, resilience, and resistance. Through these partnerships, we will reach an expanded audience, provide more multicultural and multiracial approach to constructive dialogue across the city. These services and trainings will be offered free of charge to City of Portland networks so that employees are better equipped to engage our constituents, and for community members that are part of the city networks to be better resourced to engage with their neighbors, members, and one another. City networks is an intentionally broad phrase and will serve as a guide and an evaluation mechanism rather than a means of hard and fast exclusion. The networks include bureaus, programs, advisory bodies, boards, and commissions, and our existing community partners, such as neighborhood coalitions and diversity and civic leadership partners. Civic Life staff will support outreach and engagement of the participants. Accommodations will be available for any and all of these opportunities, and program information will be distributed through city networks, website, social media. At the end of the grant period, we will be evaluating the program to adjust, make changes, and prepare for the next grant cycle that may include extending the grants or opening a new application process. Our intention is to renew these partnerships for up to 2 more years beyond fiscal years, beyond June, contingent upon the budgets and lessons learned through these first 6 months. We are requesting that you pass the emergency ordinance today so that we can get started immediately on our work and be ready to launch January 1st. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Rachel Bernstein, Partnership and Training Manager at Oregon Humanities. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners, and thank you to the Office of Community and Civic Life for helping coordinate today's presentation. Oregon Humanities brings people together to share, listen, learn, and struggle with one another about questions that impact communities across our state. These are conversations about big questions that can't be easily answered, and ones that center and highlight issues of power, justice, and equity. Our goals and outcomes for these conversations are exploration, sharing with and listening to each other, and building community. We're not setting up debates and identifying winners. We're creating opportunities for Oregonians to understand each other. We know there's power in learning about historic and current impacts of racism, then discussing how those impacts contribute to our sense of place and vision for the future. In questioning what it means to be a good person and exploring our complicity in perpetuating inequities. Reflecting on these questions in the company of others through conversation is one important way, among many, for people to think about their beliefs and their relationship between what they think and how they act in the world. Here at Oregon Humanities, we run a program called Conversation Project, and we've been partnering with organizations and leading conversations like The Space Between Us, Immigrants, Refugees in Oregon, with Southeast Uplift at the Portland Mercado, and exploring power and privilege with courage, creativity, and compassion at and with Cascadia Behavioral Health Care. For this project, we'll partner with organizations across Portland to facilitate those 50 conversations. The people who facilitate these conversations are conversation project leaders, ask questions and create a space for people to reflect on their own individual experiences, share ideas and questions they are struggling with, and hear a perspective other than their own. When conflict does arise, conversation project leaders frame it and move through it with the group, surfacing fears and biases, power imbalances, which are often below the surface of conflict. Additionally, we will lead reflective conversation trainings for City of Portland staff and networks, which will teach skills in leading these kinds of reflective discussion trainings. Our model is highly experiential and focuses on the choices we make as facilitators that lead to spaces of reflection and conversation. And during the training, we brainstorm practical applications of how we might get people thinking and talking with each other in places where people are already gathering. We're looking forward to being a part of this expansion of programming that allows the City of Portland and networks to convene conversations that increase trust, build understanding, and invite people to act and think differently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great afternoon.
Afternoon.
My name is Brandon Lee, co-founder of Training for Transformation. It is my honor and privilege to be here before you, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. First, I need to recognize the efforts of the staff of the Office of Community and Civic Life. Truly appreciate all of your efforts thus far. And today I'm just going to share a couple of highlights regarding our process, purpose, and a couple of highlights from our workshops on racism and trauma. An effective way to confront bias and rebuild a shared vision of community is through our training workshops. They are multifaceted and dynamic, using diverse formats that maximize engagement, sharing, and learning. The purpose of our racism and trauma workshops, is to confront bias, humanize our collective experiences, and transform traumatic events into healing opportunities. A few highlights include post-traumatic growth, resiliency, reconnecting to our cultural strengths, and relying on communal and ancestral wisdom to excel under pressure. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any questions? Public testimony on this item, Sue?
We had 2 people sign up. I'm not
Very
sure
good.
if they're here, Maggie and Courtney.
Is there I don't see Maggie, and I don't see Courtney. Very good. Any further questions before we call the roll? Thank you. Excellent presentation. We appreciate your being here very much, and thanks for your hard work on this. Sue, please call the roll.
Udaly.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. As we continue to reintroduce the Office of Community and Civic Life and expand our efforts to reach new audiences, it is critically important that we explain how each of our actions fits into the larger vision for the Bureau. This grant program will help the Bureau establish new partnerships, which is critically important if the goal is to truly serve all Portlanders. We cannot govern effectively or solve our most pressing problems if Portlanders are not engaging with us and with each other. These grants are coming at a time when we as a city need to proactively invest in our capacity to engage in constructive dialogues. I think we could have used some constructive dialogues on one of the items we heard earlier today. Not pointing any fingers, it's a tough one. And I am pleased to help move us in that direction. I also hope today's ordinance is a clear illustration of my and Civic Life's commitment to review all of our existing practices and our willingness to chart a new path forward where necessary. I am genuinely excited about these applicants and projects. I wish I could attend every event and training. Alas, there are 73 of them, and that will not be possible. But I'm looking forward to how this program will advance our Bureau's mission, our city's mission, and build capacity within our communities. So I'm very proud of my Civic Life team for creatively and collaboratively getting us to this point today. I want to give special thanks to Director Ree, Carrie Coe, Georgia West, and Michelle Rodriguez. It's a long day when you mispronounce the name West. For helping us deliver on the promise of a Bureau that will tirelessly work to connect Portlanders to each other and their government to promote the common good. Of course, I vote aye.
Fish.
Well, Commissioner Daly, thank you for your leadership. Director and team, thank you for the excellent presentation. Congratulations to all the grantees. I note that the Vanport Mosaic is in the house, although they weren't on the panel, and I think there may be some other folks, but it looks like a great list and a worthy endeavor, and I'm very pleased to support it. Aye.
Salzman.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Daly and Director Ree and the award-winning grantees. I look forward to the contributions you'll make to better civic life in our city. Aye.
Wheeler.
These are great partnerships, and I want to thank all of you for being part of this. And as was said right up front, this is an expansion and an enhancement of the kind of outreach and development opportunities that already exist through the Office of Community and Civic Life. Director Ree, I want to thank you for your passion and your commitment to this kind of programming. And Commissioner Daly, thank you for bringing this forward. This is a very positive development, and I'm very happy to support it. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted, and we are adjourned.
All right.